Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, peace be upon you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased in the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research to welcome and host Dr. Elsadig Elfaqih, who will deliver a presentation on Turkey, political change and the transformation of society. Dr. Elfaqih is the Secretary General of the Arab Thought Forum in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. He is a specialist in political communication, international relations, and diplomacy. He studied philosophy, history, anthropology, sociology, media, political science, and the economy of development at universities in Sudan, Egypt, Europe, and the United States. He holds PhD in political communication and diplomacy and a master's degree in media philosophy, as well as many specialized diplomas. He held many leadership positions in media, political, diplomatic, academic, research, and administrative fields, including the Council of Ministers, the presidency in the Sudan, and diplomatic posts in Washington and London. He conducted research in media, politics, diplomacy, history, and culture, and worked at the Research Center for Islamic History, Art and Culture in Istanbul, and served as a political expert at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Qatar in Doha. He also lectured at many universities and higher academic institutions and conducted training in media and in the field of development and capacity building in Sudan, Yemen, and the UK, among others. He is a writer, commentator, and political analyst. He has published numerous research studies and papers and an exceptional number of articles for newspapers in Sudan, the Arab world, and other countries. He participated in meetings and summits of regional and global organizations such as the Arab League, African Union, Organization of the Islamic Conference, Intergovernmental Authority on Development, Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, Non-Aligned Movements of the United Nations, etc. Dr. Elfaqih will talk about a very important issue, which is political change and transformation of society in Turkey. It is not yet clear whether political changes were motivated by these transformations or came as an accumulative result of political acts which affected social structures and intellectual discourse. Political changes can be seen as key indicators of transformations in the views of the elite and the people's social development and are in line with Turkish public opinion. Therefore, these debates come as no surprise. They stem from a number of important assumptions and refer to a series of political decisions related to key issues designed to re-explore cultural and civic identity, which remain open to debate in Turkish society. The re-emergence of Islam in politics and the rise of power of the Justice and Development Party is a result of changes in Turkish society in a country with a Muslim majority and an inevitable outcome of increased democracy, which has widened the political choices of social forces. This development might be viewed differently by Arab and Turkish elites depending on the extent of their emotional attachment or detachment. While the Turkish attribute this transformation to natural domestic development within a strictly local dimension that has nothing to do with changes in neighboring Arab countries. Thank you, and I remind you once again to keep your mobiles silent, please.
In
the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, I'm pleased to be with you today, and I sincerely thank my friend and colleague Dr. Jamal Sanad Swedi for this kind invitation to this esteemed institution, which remained a source of intellect and thought and benefits the public opinion and researchers and all people interested in attending these conferences and lectures, and I also thank all the people who contributed to invite me to this event, and my special thanks to the attendees. So thank you very much for attending with us this lecture. I hope that my presentation will be of benefit to you, and I hope it gives you some food for thought in this very important topic, because Turkey, as you know, was and is not an ordinary country. It was an empire that comprised more than 44 countries, and it impacted the rest of the world. It's why there is the archive, the Ottoman archive in Istanbul. If you go through these materials and tools, you will explore the history of the Ottoman Empire and Turkey. Turkey couldn't make its history known without resorting to this archive, to this Ottoman archive. The Turkish citizen is known for being very proud of their history, and it's why they value the papers they have in the archive, and they promote this history west, east, south, and north. So this importance given to the history of Turkey makes this country still an important country, given the circumstances of the Turkish society and the changes that are taking place in Turkey after the collapse of Ottoman Empire and the decline of Islamic Caliphate in the beginning of the 20th century. That end was a result of some circumstances. Some of them were normal, and because it shrank, and we saw what happened, the collapse of that empire and the emerge of a new country with a new concepts, new values, new principles for the notion of the civil nation, and it remained present in the region with its known alliances. And you know, after 1923, after Ataturk came, it made a kind of coup over its history, not only against the Ottoman heritage, but against its special heritage and culture, against its language. The transliteration of the Turkish became in Latin letters instead of Arabic, etc. So it wanted to get away from anything that was linking it to anything that has to do with Islam and Arab culture. So this trend continued, and to bring a new language after more than 8 centuries of using the Arabic letters was a real revolution and a turning point in the history of Turkey. It was a coup over the history in the full sense of the term. That coup was taking the hat of modernization, and the leaders and pioneers of this change were saying that they want to move Turkey to become more modernized like European countries at that time. So this clash between the old and modern remained inside the Turkish society among the politicians. And I wanted to make this introduction before moving to the details of this presentation. So if we talk about Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, I have to read this statement of him. I'm quoting. He said, I didn't leave any stable and stagnant idea or immoral heritage. My immoral heritage is science, is knowledge and mind. To pretend that somebody brought something that is invariable is not true. I believe in science, knowledge and mind, the power of mind. This can be accepted in general, but if we look at the personality of Atatürk, who tried to convey to people through this quote that everything can change, the ideas of people can change, there is nothing that remains stagnant. He became, and I mean Mustafa Kemal Atatürk became a legend, and the people of Turkey made him a legend. So he was not referred to in history as an ordinary person, but as a legendary leader in Turkey. So this resulted in dealing with the personality of Atatürk in a strange and peculiar way. And I remember a documentary which was talking about the life of Atatürk in a different way, and it was heavily criticized by the media, and all people said that this was an extraordinary man and should be dealt with in an extraordinary way, even in history. And the idea of Organicon and other ideas which refer to that period of rule of Atatürk still is viewed as a legendary period. Now we can say that, and we can notice that if we look at the way people were talking about Atatürk, we conclude simply that these stories include a lot of exaggerations, and a lot of people and the ordinary person who doesn't really believe in that person as a legendary leader. Of course, he is believed to be a nationalist leader who contributed a lot and made a lot of achievement for Turkey and deserves all the respect, but he had some failures, and of course this does not diminish his value, because he made a lot of achievements, and the armies he led made a lot of achievements. So he is a personality which is worth of respect by all the Turkish people. But the legendary aspect of this leader is the thing that is debatable. So some critics now say that even if we talk about secularism that was brought by Kemal Ataturk, was not started by actually by Ataturk, but by other ideators and leaders and the people, the leaders who followed him after he passed away. So for the people who wanted to make a cut between the modern Turkey and the Caliphate, the Ottoman Empire, this brought a kind of complex against Al-Khilafah. Anything that has to do with the Islamic Caliphate became a point of criticism. So the Kemalists, in addition to their struggles in Turkey, they created a number of enemies. So the Arabs became enemies, and anyone who was part of the Ottoman Empire became a potential or illusionary enemy for the modern Turkey. It's why this resulted in ending relations with a number of states and countries, and on the other hand, Turkey strived to follow the path of European countries. The Turkish regime wanted to imitate Europe in freedom, in democracy, and in allowing the citizen to be himself or herself. So they wanted to imitate Turkey by separating religion from politics and from society. And when they did that, they faced a lot of problematics. So the Kemalist period failed to embed this new culture and new trend in its Islamic origin and heritage. And it was understood because if we compare other coups nowadays, when there is a regime which conducts a coup, they are usually, its leaders are busy with clearing all the heritages of their ancestors and their predecessors. And if we go back to the beginning of the Kemalist period and era, there was a great effort in ending all the aspects of Ottoman Empire, Islamic, Persian, Kurdish heritages in the beginning, and this was severely and aggressively fought. The Arab, from their side, became looked at as enemies, and their cultural component, like religion of Islam and the Arabic language, became something that the modern Turkey became not proud of and want to make distance with the people who belong to Arab and Islamic country. This is what happened. So this created a new reality in Turkey. The second problematic that faced the Kemalists in Turkey is building a policy which goes in line with the secularism and the secularist trend. They didn't find during the building of this Turkish soil some ideal practices practices. It's why they exerted violence and they eliminated their opponents in the beginning. And there are several stories which reflect that reality. A lot of incidents happened during the trials and attempts and trials to modernize the Turkish society and follow the path of Turkey. If you remember Adnan Grace, the real coup d'etat was around 8 years. In 1924, the Caliphate was cancelled, and after a few years the azan was stopped and prohibited. That was the first period of change, the first real period of change in the Kemalist era. After that, and despite the fact that the intifadas and the criticism that the Kemalist leaders faced with Naqshbandi, who was sentenced to death, and after him Badi' al-Zaman al-Hamadani in 1925, Saeed al-Nawrasi, who was imprisoned and was banned to Warfa, and but he kept sending his messages throughout 35 years, and these letters and messages were known as messages of light or nur, and these messages contributed to the creation of a new people and a new category of intellect in the Turkish society who have their own perspective at looking at the Ataturk and the Kemalite era. So the modernization of Turkey, when they were modernizing the country, they discovered that this will enable the Turkish citizen to voice his opinion and to claim their right to go back to their religion, to their heritage and to their culture. It's why Kemalists found that Anatolia was not receiving their thoughts in the beginning. It's why when Adnan Greece and after the parties were allowed in 1945, and when he could win the presidency in 1950, he tried to deal with the farmers of Anatolia, and one of the convictions and accusations which led him to sentence to death after the coup d'etat, the military coup d'etat. That was because of these changes which were not lead according to the principles of secularism of the Turkish state at that time. So Adnan Mandris, he conducted a number of economic changes to the extent that these economic reforms became something that inflict some fear among others, and of course he wanted to shift Turkey from the sick man to a modernized and developed country. So modernization became paradoxically one of the problems which led Adnan Mandris to be sentenced to death. And one of the things that was taken against him during the trial is that he went to pilgrimage to Hajj secretly and discreetly, and that was an accusation at that time. And that incident has a great impact. Well, he tried to modernize the society of Anatolia, and if this economic reform succeeded in Anatolia, this can lead to a revolution over and against the Ataturk and Kemalist Turkey. So this is to tell you the problems that were occurring inside the Turkish society before talking about the clashes and some struggles which Turkey was facing with its neighbors and with the other countries. So the new Turkey was trying its best to be European, but was not following to the letters the principles of European culture, like democracy, the freedom of belief, and anything that links the society to its history and to its past. And that was something worth mentioning if we compare Turkey with Europe. The other problematic is how Turkey was perceiving democracy. Adnan Mandris constituted the Democratic Party and had a great victory and became a leader who is somebody loved by a big and large category of Turkey. He came back to Azan in Arabic, and he allowed teaching some Islamic education in some schools, and a lot of other aspects of Islamic heritage were brought back to the Turkish society. Adnan Mandris, we know that he is the one who helped Turkey to join the NATO, and he strengthened the relation of Turkey with Israel and a lot of other achievements worldwide. Erdogan praised the leaders of Turkey. He mentioned Ataturk, Erbakan, Adnan Mandris as well. So he praised all of them. So and of course Turgut Ghuzal, and he had a similar experience with Adnan Mandris, and both had 10 years of rule, and both of them had the same destiny, which was a sentence to death. The first one was sentenced, and the other one was poisoned by the military. So the mechanisms of violence and some organizations like Organicon and other organizations which are specialized in assassinating the opponents, etc. This organization were not contributing to the achievement of democracy in the Republican era, and the military and their continuous intervention is an Ottoman aspect. In Kisharia, in Kisharit, in the Ottoman Empire was intervening frequently. It intervened 40 times to remove some ministers. So in the Ottoman culture, the intervention of the military is not something new, is not something linked to the Kemalist era, but it was deeply rooted in the Ottoman Empire and in Ottoman heritage. So with the violence that was exerted against some people in the new Turkey. Lots of things happened. The society started its resistance very early. In 1924, there were some waves of intellectual resistance, and by the way, Jama'at al-Nur, or the Group of Light, is the school which graduated Najmuddin Arbakan. And these groups were not importing any intellect or any thought from outside, but they emerged internally. And if we look at the Islamists in the old Turkey or the new Turkey, if we look at it, we find that it is something unique to Turkey. It is something that stems from the instinct, will of the Turkish citizen to be religious, and its pride of its history, of its Ottoman Empire. Most of the Turkish citizens say that they are proud of their history because we were ruling the world. Until now, they say this proudly. And even we in the Arab and the Islamic world, we remember that when these cartoons that were resentful to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and some people said that there was during the Ottoman Empire a play which was planned to be performed in Paris, and he intervened. The emperor, the Ottoman emperor, said, "You stop that play or I will come to Paris." So the Ottoman Empire was very strong, and the Turkish people and citizens are still remembering their history, and they are proud of several stories when they were the sovereigns of majority of Europe and other parts of Islamic other countries, and they were the greatest empire at that time, and this is documented in their archive in Istanbul. So on the other hand, if we talk about the Sufism, and in particular Naqshbandiya and the Nawrasiya, they are predominant in the Turkish Sufism. Even the modern elites, they refer to this source of Sufism, especially, as I mentioned, Naqshbandiya and the Nawrasiya, and recently the movement of service, Al-Khidma, which is led by Abdullah Gulen. And this movement have an important role in raising awareness in the Turkish society on the right to belong to the Islam, the right to be religious, etc. And this movement allowed the citizens to modernize their perspective and their views toward their leaders, and they contributed to the raise of this awareness. So the Republican Party, which ruled the country from 1924, which participated in ruling the country from 1924 to 1950. During that period, it witnessed several steps and stages of weakness. If we go back to the history, we find that a lot of historical aspects are mentioned, and also geographical aspects. This is one of the debate in Turkey. There is a book of Ahmed Dawood Oglu who says that geography is the door to go back to history. Turkey, as a geography, is not a bridge between the West and the East, as some people want it, and it's not what NATO countries wanted. It is something different. It is not an appendix as Republicans wanted. It's not an appendix to Europe. It has its own position. It has its own depth in civilization and culture, and it should remain deeply rooted in its civilizational heritage and cultural heritage. This is one of the drivers which helped a lot to regain the glories of the old Turkey. If we look at the experience of Arbakan, he was proud of being following Nawrasiya, and he was opposing a lot of political principles, and he was declaring and claiming that being proud of the Ottoman heritage should be done by all citizens, and this was not welcomed by some contemporary intellects and leaders at that time, but after that, this invitation to have this perspective and this unique reading of history started to reach its share and to become wider in the Turkish society, and that was part of the new awareness among the Turkish elites. So most of intellectuals and elites became more aware that we are the center of our region, and we have a long history in the Ottoman Empire, and before that with the Byzantine, etc. And we have a heritage that we should be proud of, and we should continue our civilization and achievements. We should continue the greatness of the history of Turkey. So this civilizational awareness helps the modern elites to adopt this trend. As I said, Mandaris managed to get the majority in 2 years in the parliament, and Najmuddin Arbakan with Erdogan managed to do part of that also. Of course, this is not only due to the organization, to the good organization of the party, but also because of these accumulations in the Turkish society, which made the citizens more mature and more able and capable of looking at their rights and the obligations of the parties toward the society. And it's why we saw that Turkey is now flourishing in terms of economy, and the Turkish citizen became different in terms of giving more priority to economy and became more pragmatic and not looking really at ideologies. So this pragmatism and realism that was followed by a number of politicians in driving the change, the political change in particular, particular was an attempt to remove the depth of Kemalist era, because this implies that secularism is one thing and sacralizing a personality who is Ahmed Ataturk is something wrong. And the other conclusion and the other new thing in Turkey is that the state is not an enemy to the religion, not necessarily an enemy to the religion. So the violence which was witnessed in the beginning of the Kemalist era was fading decade after the other, and the relations of Turkey with its neighbors became also better and different. And even the actual regime, the current regime, is doing the same thing. Erdogan is celebrating this experience and wishes its regime to last till 2023 in order to celebrate 1 century of the Kemalist republic and to celebrate the Kemalist era. There is no debate over the importance of that era, and there is no determination or will to cut with that, but it is more dealing wisely and catching up with what was made in the beginning of the Kemalist republic. So it's why we say that there is a new way of dealing with the complexities of the Turkish reality, because it is not one aspect only Turkish, but there are different ethnicities in Turkey. There are the Kurds, and the Kurds were called the Kurds of mountains, and this terms was abolished, and now there are several attempts to integrate the Kurds and other ethnicities inside the Turkish society and make all ethnicities coexist with each other in a perfect way in a melting pot. So it's why I said that Tayyip Erdogan is wishing to remain in power till 2023 to celebrate that century. And also there are preparations in order to meet the challenges of the coming decades, and the Kurds became more empowered now in Turkey. This is a reality that we cannot deny. Also, if we look at it, the two aspects of ethnicity and religion, we can see that there are ethnicities and religions. There are Alawites in the Islamic world, there are Shiites, there are other doctrines. There are doctrines other than Shafi'ite, there are other Christians and the Jews as well, here and there in the Turkish society. It's why we have to find some equations to integrate all these ethnicities in the political reality, and also to celebrate the civilizational heritage in all its aspects, in its culture, religion, etc. Also, there is stress that the government is no longer against the religion. It's why we knew that a number of mosques which were destroyed in the early years of Kemal Ataturk were restored later. And this political reform cannot be sustainable under one unique pattern. It's why the Turkish they avoid willingly to talk about any one of their attributes. They don't tell people, they don't tell others we are against secularism, or we are Islamist, or we are thinking of re-establishing the Ataturk state or republic. They avoid to link any attribute with themselves. And also the attempt to segregate between religion and the military, because the military remained influential for decades, and they were fighting religion, and all the coup d'etat which happened were driven by some attempt of some leaders to bring back religion to the modern Turkey. And it is very known that some officials who have their women veiled, they were used to put their wives at the back of the car in order not to be seen by the others. And more than that, some of them were stripped from some positions because they were conservative or because their wives were veiled. So this is a glance at the modern history of Turkey. Now there is progress in economics, starting from the Adnan Mandris, Turgot Özal, and a tremendous progress and advance in the era of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The rate of growth in Turkey is high now, and it's number 16 worldwide in terms of economy. The GDP is high, is more than $1 trillion, and that was achieved in a record time. Now, some people in Turkey talk about the comeback, the proud comeback to the past, and they say that the future, we will make our way to the future, to a bright future through our past. And if we look at the recent situations, the recent incidents in Turkey, we'll all remember the Marwa, the parliamentary person Marwa, who entered with a veil to the parliament, and she was expelled. And I was in Istanbul, I was working there, and I witnessed the honoring of Deniz Baykal, and he was one of the extremist Republicans, and he was saying that publicly. And he came to honor some women who were veiled, and one of them were wearing niqab, and he said publicly to the media that this is the change and the transformation that we are witnessing, and we should recognize it and acknowledge it. And that declaration by this personality was really significant at that time. And choosing Akmal Din Ihsan Oglu, who was born in Egypt and studied in Egypt because his father fled the Kemalists in Turkey, and his father contributed to the establishment of the Ottoman archive in Turkey. And he compiled a lot of books about Ottoman Empire and Ottoman Turkey. And to see that he was selected as one candidate for the presidency, and 5 parties joined him, this is a reflection of a great change and a great transformation in the Turkish society and in the political life of Turkey. It means that the Turkish society changed its priorities. They focus more on economy and other realities and factors, and they don't prioritize ideologies. This is the only explanation of this recent changes, and the example that I gave you of Ihsan ad-Din Oglu. So, if we look at Turkey now, if we look at Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the Party of Development and Justice, or the Justice, all the parties which are described as Islamic party, we see that they are parties which include all categories of society. They include conservative people, secularists, and lots of different people. This is a healthy phenomenon, and it means that the Turkish society is reconciling with its past, with its heritage, without any noise or buzz. I attended a lecture by George Friedman in 16 December 2009, and he talked about the probability of Turkey becoming, of course, at that time there were several examples of success and stories of success stories of Turkey, how it became a big player in the region, and he predicted that Turkey can become a new empire in 2040, and he said that this will be willingly, and this will come by itself, because a lot of big countries will collapse and Turkey will find itself another empire. So this is what Friedman said in that lecture, and I think I have a quote from him. I have it in my notebook. Now I come to the last point, which is Arabs and Turks. We followed how the Turkish leaders were welcomed. We all know that the relations between the Turks and the Arabs are very ancient or very old, and there is a lot of common historical aspects between Arabs and the Turks, not in Turkey only, but in other countries like Igor in China and some countries of the past, Soviet Union. Some of the citizens say they are Arabs, and others consider themselves Turks and Arabs at the same time. So this means that there are a lot of common heritage aspects between Arabs and the Turks. There is Washington Institute for Near East Studies. There was a prediction that maybe the Turks who coexist with Arabs, if they reach power, Turkey will shift into Eastern countries, and maybe this started to be realized because Turkey has some past with the Arab world. There is a number of Turks who speak Arabic fluently. Abdullah Gul, who worked in the Arab Bank for Development, and and Ishler, the vice president of the prime minister, who speaks Arabic fluently and who studied in Amman, and and Ihsanuddin Oglu and others who speak Arabic fluently, and they love Arabic and they have big relations with the Arab countries. Also, the Turkish experience is now a model in the Arab world. A model. This means that the Turkish politicians are leading by example. They are viewed as good and very successful model. The Party of Development and Justice doesn't talk about its peculiarity, but a lot of Arab countries are adoring the example of and the model of the Turkish experience. And we all know that most of Arab countries are more conservative than Turkey, but still the kind of envy the Turkish experience in establishing democracy and not clashing and and the fact that there is no clash between religion and politics. A lot of parties in Arab and Islamic countries are trying to imitate the Turkish experience, but without success. In Egypt, there is a constitution which states that the religion is the Islamic religion of the country, and a lot of other things. And in the Turkish constitution, there is nothing similar to that. This drives us to ask the question: what is this Turkish model that other counterparts and other parties are trying to imitate in the Arab world? This model is not defined, as is not precisely described, and I think that this is one of the reasons which delay the debate between the Turkish and Arab elites. The Turks think that the Islamic parties, they have their references and they cannot refer to some doubted movement or group which is debatable and not reliable in the eyes of the Turks. And if we talk about the revolution in Iran and the movements that are taking their principles from that revolution, or the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt or other movements, they are different and they have their own references. And they aim to export their ideologies to other countries, but in Turkey it's different. There is no willingness to export their model or their pattern. They just work for the Turkish society and Turkish citizens. That is something that is worth noting. And of course there are different readings. Some people say the Turkish model is a Turkish model. That's it. The Party of Development and Justice includes Muslim, conservative Muslims, leftist, secularists, etc. And this situation is different in other parties in the Arab countries. This is not the case. We find that in every single party we find people who are loyal to some ideology and not to the other. I think that this phenomenon was something that helps mature, that helped the Turkish experience to become more mature. Turkey now is seeking a new balance and equilibrium between the East and the West. And the Arab Spring, or what is called the Arab Spring, it was something that didn't serve Turkey in terms of its relations with the neighbors. Turkey succeeded in a record time to reconcile with its neighbors, especially Syria, which is totally different, ideologically different, and even different even in the regime systems. The Alawites there, it's different in nationalism that is adopted by Damascus. It's different than the regime of Ankara. So all these disparities, despite this situation, they could reach an agreement and conclude treaties and open the doors of Turkey's for Syria, and that was achieved in record time. It's why what happened in the Levant was not serving at all the Turkish policy. Turkey was affected by what's happening in Iraq, in Syria. Dr. Ahmed Dawood Oglu was always mentioning that if he is not in Baghdad, he will be in Tehran. This means that even the relations with Iran improved. And these relations, in addition to the relation of Turkey with Russia, all these relations were affected negatively due to this disorders and instability in Iraq, Syria, and other countries. And of course, we have to bear in mind the position of the Kurdistan of Iraq, of course, and its importance to the Turkey. So the strategic depth, which was excessively talked about in several books, were heavily affected by this Arab Spring, between quotes, and we witnessed the adoption of some emotional attitude during these uprisings in the Arab world. Some borders were closed and others were opened, etc. So there was a change in the relations of Turkey with its neighbors. I think and I believe that when reading the Turkish experience, we should be very precise and careful in describing what is going on in Turkey. But the one thing that in my opinion, is worth praising and contemplating is that it is an emergent experience and it is a successful experience. Regardless of whether we agree with the Turkish experience or we disagree, they made a lot of achievements. They made their people more satisfied. And of course, if we look at these paradoxes, maybe we don't tolerate them in our culture and civilization in this part of the world, but we cannot deny that they succeeded and they served their citizens, and they are moving to more progress. And I hope that this center manages And I think that this center is playing a very important role in the field of research and enlightening researchers and intellectuals and publication of new books and translations. I hope that it contributes to this debate between the Turks and the Arabs. And thank you very much. And I welcome any question or comment from you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sadiq Elfaqih, for this presentation, which is undoubtedly a valuable addition to the series of lectures in the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research. And now I open the door to the questions or comments, and I ask you please to introduce yourself and to be brief, concise, and precise.
كمال عكروت من سفارة تونس بالإمارات.
I'm from the Embassy of Tunisia in Abu Dhabi. Thank you very much for this exciting presentation. My question is, to what extent or what is the future of the relation between Turkey and Europe? Thank you.
طبعا نجوم المركز دائما في المقدمة. تفضل أستاذ.
Yes. And
thank
you very much, Doctor, for this excellent presentation. I'm Taysir Sliman, an employee. Turkey is has an eye on East and another eye on the West. So this, I think, impacts its relation with its neighbor, and I think that Turkey cannot gain neighbors from Europe and neighbors from the Arab world, and the majority of Turkish people are Muslims. And what is your opinion as to its attitude from Syria, this radical change towards Syria?
Khalid
Omar. I'm a writer and a journalist. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much. It's very good that you started with the collapse and the demise of Caliphate, Islamic Ottoman Caliphate, because nowadays we are witnessing other powers like ISIS, which try to establish a new caliphate. And I have a question in this context. When we want to find an identity in any country, determining building policies, if we look at our circumstances, we have different regimes in the Arab world. Modernization, the decision in the Arab world is either dominated by external parties or players, or we don't know what to do, and we don't know whether we are following democracy of the voting box or something else. I have another question, which is there a probability to bridge the gaps and extend the gaps, bridges between Turkey and Arab countries, given the tension of relations between Turkey and its attitude toward what is happening in Egypt, Libya, and Syria? For the first question, the relation between Turkey and Europe is not stable. It's not a matter of Turkey, but both parties, both Europe and Turkey, they haven't yet finalized or concluded some pattern of agreed upon relation between each other. Of course, Turkey benefited from the experience of Europe. When we talk about Turkey joining Europe, And in Turkey, this is something debatable. Even in Turkey, it's not something that is agreed upon. There is some opposition from some known parties in Europe. There are voices in France. France is not agreeing, does not welcome Turkey to join Europe. Valéry Giscard d'Estaing claimed that openly, and he said that this is a Christian club and Europe cannot include an Islamic country given its population, which exceeds 75 Muslims, in addition to the minorities and ethnicities. And in Scandinavia, some people of Turkish origin which failed to integrate in their society. So they had some suspicions, and a lot of Europeans take that as an excuse in order to reject Turkey from joining the European Union. That was a good thing for Turkey, because this encouraged Turkey to expedite its reform in order to meet the expectations of the criteria of Europe. And another issue, which is the questions which are posed regarding the religion. Even if some teacher, for instance, has a history of teaching the Islamic education, the first thing that is asked is, or asked about in several programs in Istanbul and the Council in Europe, they ask repeatedly, they say repeatedly that religion is always present in Turkish society, and they deny the right of the Turkish secularist country to do that. And when they ask the question, why do you teach Islamic education, why do you pretend to be a secularist country, the answer that is given by them is that we cannot deprive the people who want to learn about religion not to. And I'm sure that the people who look west are diminishing, and the ones who from the Turkish society who look eastward are increasing. On the other hand, so this willingness to join Europe is decreasing for the time being, not only among the decision makers, the politicians in Turkey, but also among the Turkish citizens. Turkey is part and parcel of this European organizations like NATO and other organizations, and it benefits from these memberships. And I think for the time being that they are okay with these memberships. And it gives Turkey more immunity toward, more immunity against any vulnerability in terms of economy or politics. And there was someone, I don't remember the name, who was a European, who was very known, and he said that you, if you are wise enough, you make Turkey a member of European Union before it's too late. And he was a keynote speaker in a conference. And it's very known that the United States of America is encouraging the joining of Turkey to the European Union because it will benefit from that. And it thinks that that continuing this good relation between Turkey and Europe will serve the United States, and the United States always remembers that Turkey was one of the first countries which made agreements and established relations with Israel. So for the United States, it is something that is beneficial to the states. Regarding the national identity in Turkey, in my opinion, we cannot talk about one size fits all. In the Arab countries, the religion and its relation with the states, the civil states, in Arab countries, there is no clash between religion and the society. There are components in Arab countries which need some reconciliation in the context of the unifying identity, unifying Arab identity, and also politics should be discussed differently. And I don't want to talk about domination because, as you know, countries and states have relations and have a common interest. Every single relation is a kind of diminishing the sovereignty because you allow the other part some of your possessions and belongings. So this is something political and relative, and every single country has its interests and its specificities and its own priorities. Regarding the issue of democracy, democracy cannot be realized with impulsion, and we saw a lot of experiences which came and declined easily and very fast because there was, and I don't say that Arab societies are not ready for democracy. I'm not saying this, but I'm saying that there should be graduation. If we read the principles of democracy, they cannot be realized suddenly. Always there are compromises and there is graduation, and the problem is that the Arab structures in our countries don't tend to give others to express themselves, and they don't give compromises. This is what led to the decline of some experiences very fast. If we look at Turkey, democracy couldn't realize what it's realized unless couldn't realize this achievement without the graduation and the accumulations of decades since 1923. But I should say here that if these parties in the Arab world are very sticking to their ideologies, and if they think that they are right and others are wrong, they will not go far at all. As to the question of whether there is a probability or a possibility to extend the relations of Turkey with Arab countries like Egypt, I believe that politics does not allow a total disagreement or boycotting or stop of relations. There are always some common interests. And if we take Egyptian example, they have distinguished history with Turkey, and we remember the era of Khediwi, and they have a lot of common principle in the modern Turkey. Egypt is a central country in the Arab world. In the same way, Turkey is a central country. So I think that the relations between Egypt and Turkey will be reconciled. And if you go to the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, you will find the Egyptian souk, the Egyptian market, and you will find the rest area of Khediwi. And one of the places which reflects the position of Egypt in Egypt. For Egypt, Egypt has some particular position in the awareness of the Turks. There was a wali, and in the past there was a kiosk, kind of kiosk where al-wali comes to take some rest. And Al-Khediwi was using this rest area. So Turks still remember these relations between Turkey and Egypt. So, and we don't have to be impatient. We should wait a little. And despite the fact that Turkey was supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, and despite that fact, I think that the relations between the current Turkey and the current Egypt will be reconciled in the short term. The relations with Syria, I think that they necessitate some action in order to rectify the mistakes that have been committed by both parties, and I mean here Turkey and Syria, because we have Alawites and Kurds in both Turkey and Syria. They have a lot of common interests and common attributes. And if we look at the other question, so we can, and before moving to the next question, I should remind you that one of the definitions of politics is that it is the art of the possible. So we can regain and bring back these good relations between Turkey and Egypt. I really believe in that.
تفضل السادة المقدمين.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much. Badr Shatri, I'm a researcher. I have a question regarding the Arab world and the remapping of the Arab world. And I don't know whether it is a Western conspiracy theory, because there is a debate to redraw the map of the Arab world, which means replacing the Sykes-Picot Treaty with another map or other maps and changing the entities. This is a debate that is taking place in the West, and it has nothing to do with the conspiracy theory. It is a reality in the West, and it is widely debated in the West. Turkey has a big role in the region, especially after the Arab Spring, and it has huge interest. Is there any role for Turkey in redrawing the maps of the region, of the Arab world?
نظرا لضيق الوقت آخر سؤال.
Because we don't have time, I will give room to 2 questions only.
داني أبو بشارة من لبنان.
Danny Bubshara from Lebanon. We always talk about Turkey as a model for democracy, but what is the use of democracy if we don't have human rights, if there is no reconciliation with the history? We remember that the third of Turkey was inhabited by Armenians and Syrians, and they were expelled from their homes and their churches were destroyed. And what happened there is similar to what exists in Palestine by Israel. So when we talk about Turkey, we have to remember what Turkey did to Armenians and to other ethnicities. And let's not talk about Cyprus. A lot of problems are in this city, and there are dozens of villages in Cyprus, which is now 2 countries. The villagers in Cyprus were expelled from the Turkish part of Cyprus. So Turkey state is not giving the Christians the right. It's not given the Armenians their rights. Hagia Sophia, there is still a debate whether they will change it to a mosque or keep it as it is. I beg you, please, don't analyze things that way. Keep that Byzantine heritage and respect the rights of others. Thank you.
علي نواتي مجلس أبو ظبي للتعليم.
Ali Nawati from Abu Dhabi Education Council. What Arabs lost from the demise and collapse of the Ottoman Empire?
طيب إعادة رسم الخريطة هذا
Redrawing the map of the Arab world.
قدمت محاضرة في
I would like to tell you that I had a presentation in Jordan, and the title of the presentation was The Limits of Blood, and that presentation was published in one of the magazines in Jordan, and the article that was published was The Limits of Blood. And it was about the Treaty of Sykes-Picot and the Lausanne borders, because those borders, when they divided the Arab world, they didn't take into consideration the ethnicities and the tribal aspects and factors. It's why the map should be redrawn on the basis of the blood limits. And in this article, I mentioned that this redraw of the map will not be realized unless bloodshed in the Arab world. And we see now what's going on in the Arab world. And always the conspiracy theory is not necessarily a conspiracy. Sometimes it is naive if we don't believe in the conspiracy theory. And the history tells us that what was believed in some incidents in the past as a conspiracy, it was the truth. And we are told by the history of a lot of examples.
في المنطقة الخرف كثيرة وما يحدث في المنطقة
What is happening in the Arab world, I think, is the introduction to this redraw of the maps in the Arab world and the fragmentation of the Arab world. And it is a Zionist dream, an Israeli Zionist dream, to fragment the Arab world into pieces and into small, very small countries. Israelis always talk about Israelis winning and what is going on in Egypt, in Iraq, or what Egypt witnessed during the last 2 years, which were thought to aggravate this. This was taught by Israelis to serve Israel and to make it the only party and the only country in the Middle East which widens its strength and predominance. So these maps, which were published in some Western magazines and newspapers, or not necessarily belonging to conspiracy theory, might happen. And what we are witnessing, as I said, may be introduction to this redrawing of these maps. As for the Turkey and Arabs, Turkey was emotional, and even its attitude toward the Arab Spring, I believe personally that it was emotional. The attitude toward Libya, toward Syria, I don't think it was widely discussed among the decision makers in Turkey. And I had some discussions with some Turks, and I found out through these discussions that they don't all agree with what is declared by the Turkish government. There are some people who disagree with that, and they know that the Turkish attitude and position is more emotional, and this emotional tendency to consider the Arab world part of the Turkish history and Ottoman history. So this is something that is more emotional, as I said. There was a confusion from the Turkish side. The dreams of Turkey were heavily affected because of this Arab Spring. It lost a number of neighbors, and its relations with some countries were negatively affected. And I still think that in the short term, the relations of Turkey with these neighbors will remain weak, but in the medium term, this can change. In the Turkish subconscious, the Turks are very attached to Palestinians, to Gaza, and I was there, Istanbul, and I saw something that I was witnessing for the first time. There were demonstrations, and Turks were crying sincerely and were having tears in their eyes because of what's happening in Gaza and in Palestine. And that demonstration was huge. It's why we can say that there is a very strong attachment between Turkey and Palestine, and also with Arab countries in less strong level. There is an attempt to reconcile with the past. with the components of the Turkish society. Turks, there are Alawites and other ethnicities. These ethnicities were loyal to dictator regimes. Alawites or supporting the Republican Party in Turkey. As to the Armenians, the modern Turkey tried to reconcile, and there is the visit of Abdullah Gül to Armenia. It is an example to show the goodwill and the good faith, and this effort are trying to reconcile with some mistakes of the predecessors. And we saw a candidate to the presidency who is Kurd, and bearing in mind that a lot of Kurds voted for Erdogan, but the thing that recorded by history is that for the first time a Kurd who speaks Kurdish language applies for the candidacy to the presidency, and that was impossible a decade ago. So these transformations are trying to contain all components of the Turkish society and are better than what was before, and I'm sure that these accumulations will contribute to making the Turkish experience more mature, and because this will lead to more democracy and more freedom and more integrity in justice, economy, and other fields. This is all I can say about your questions. Regarding the civilizational relation with the West, you mentioned Hagia Sophia. Hagia Sophia, that was a symbol of clash between the West and the East. For us, we have we name the Turkey this bird, the Turkey Dik al-Habashi, and for them they call it, which means what I can translate into the bird of Habasha, and others call it Dik of Rome, which means bird of Rome. So these are some cultural differences, and unfortunately, there are still some things that exist in the culture, in our culture, both of us. There is also some kind of chair some West use, and they call it Ottoman to diminish the Ottoman history. So these stereotypes, they don't serve the relations between the West and the Turkey from one side, and the Turks and the West from the other side. We should collaborate our efforts in order to strengthen our relations, and there are some residues of the civilizational clash between Turkey and the rest of the world. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for your valuable time you spent with us. We thank all the attendees, and we invite all of you to join us in the restaurant. Please follow the signpost, and if you don't know, you can ask any of our organizers to lead you to the dinner buffet. Thank you.